let me pray for us, and then it'll be great to hear from you guys. So Lord, again, we just thank you for the way that you are at work in this world, in your mission, your love for people everywhere, and the way in which you do foster these pockets of your people being on mission together as family. And for the opportunity to hear from Geoff and Hayley today, Lord, we pray you'll give us ears to hear from you, and inquisitive minds, a real curiosity about what they've experienced and what we can learn from them in the course of the conversation today. So we ask your blessing to be upon us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys. Over to you guys to share a little bit about your story today.
Sure. So I guess a broad overview of what we've planned. We don't have slides to show you or anything like that. We've just got a bit of the narrative of our story, how we got to where we got to, and then a couple of sort of key learnings to share at the end of that, and then a couple of questions that we can pop in the chat afterwards if that's
right.
That's the plan. And Hayley, you'll kick us off and interrupt me rambling. Hayley.
Sounds good.
So just a bit of a background on us for those who don't know us. We've been married for 16 years, even though Geoff has 17 written here. We've got 3 children who are all in primary school, the grade 2, 4 and 6. So we'll be starting the high school journey next year. Geoff's been an associate pastor at Forest Lake Baptist in Queensland, like Brisbane South Side, for coming in on, I think it's about 10 years now. I've been a stay-at-home mum for a lot of those years, although I have sort of returned to work sort of twice for little bits and pieces in that. But a lot of my journey in the last sort of 10 years has just been around sort of bit of volunteer work and ministry opportunities and raising the kids. So but in the last sort of 3 years, we've really had this sort of bit more intense journey where the Lord sort of brought us to this place where he's shifted our journey, and we've been really focused on being disciple makers and how do we sort of grow that into a missional community. So that's sort of what we're going to be sharing a bit about today. So the background before a bit of that, Geoff has grown up as a PK. So he's a pastor's kid and all that entails. So very involved in traditional church. I've sort of had a bit of the opposite journey to that. I sort of grew up with sort of sporadic attendance in a Sunday school and in a youth group sort of in my earlier years, but no sort of regular Christian influence outside of those programs. So it was really just sort of little bits and pieces here and there, and then sort of mid-high schoolish, that just completely stopped. It wasn't until I was in university that I met a few Christians and got involved in an organisation called Student Life, which is Campus Crusade for Christ. Can't remember what it's called now. Power to Change, that's the one. And that was when I became a Christian. So that was sort of my real first involvement with Christian community. So that was really foundational for both of us. For Geoff, it was sort of moving out of home and getting really involved in this community on his own and getting to be really involved in the ministry that. So there was just this real missional zeal. It was like really heavily evangelism, getting alongside each other, discipleship. You know, when I became a Christian, it was, all right, who are you going to meet with weekly? Who are you going to read the Bible with? Let's get out there. Let's learn how to share your faith. And, you know, and I was like, wow, okay, this is awesome. And so that was sort of end of my first year uni. And so I was sort of involved in that for a bit. Geoff also was sort of did that journey together. But then we sort of stepped back. We're really encouraged, you know, you have to be part of a local church because we're not church, we're a parachurch organisation. So I started going along to a local church with one of the Christians from that group. And then when I finished uni, Geoff started coming along as well. And I remember sort of being in there and we were like, hey, we've gone from this community where we're just totally involved heavily in this community of Christians to there was sort of like just it was more, we went to a home group, we went to a service, and I remember there was this big change, especially I suppose since that was really what I'd known of Christian community. So we sort of, Geoff joined the worship team, and we're involved in first Sunday rocks up at church and like, join the music team. First day. But so we sort of joined life group, and it sort of plodded on for a while there. Geoff became a school teacher, finished his degree, and I changed and did a youth ministry internship because I was like, I actually really want to, I have a heart for people and I want to do something with this. And so we sort of got involved in the youth ministry then of the church through the youth ministry internship. And I remember seeing that glimpse of the discipleship again when I went on a camp and these girls came and said, oh, we want to come to your house and study the Bible. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I went to the youth pastor and I said, oh, we want to do this. And he said, okay, we'll come a youth leader and you can do this. But there was this, we were really encouraged to just do more than the once a week or the twice a week. You know, started actually taking them out to breakfast, going along to their school performances, and really I was like, okay, this is really what that how you grow someone and do life together. So we sort of went along in that pattern in doing those things for a couple of years, and then
I've been very involved in traditional church my whole life, like what Hayley mentioned on PK. So sort of the normal is the normal. And so I sort of went from student life having this experience of, oh, wow, it felt like church to me, but they were saying, we're not church, you need to go to church. And I went to church and went, this doesn't feel like church, what's going on? And I got to the point where I was sort of embedded back in sort of the traditional church on the worship team and life group and leading this, that, and the other. And had a sense that God was calling me to become a pastor. Preaching and teaching was something that, you know, felt like people were saying, hey, I think you've got a giftedness in this area, you should explore that. And in exploring that, felt like Bible college was the right thing. And on the application to get into Bible college and to start the registration process to become a pastor, there's this nasty little question where you have to give a referee who's a Christian who knows you and a referee who's not a Christian that knows you. And I realized when I was trying to write down, well, who can I put down for this non-Christian that knows me really well? I didn't have anyone. I was the epitome of a rabbit hole Christian. I was teaching in a Christian school, leading a Christian youth group, going to play in a Christian touch footy comp. And, you know, the people that were my friends that I was spending my time investing in were all Christians, and I couldn't even write one non-Christian's name down on a page. That was like a kick to the guts. And, it was an eye-opener that my life didn't used to be like that. But in hanging around and investing and following the throes of what a traditional church said, hey, do this, then do this, then do this, I ended up in a point where I had no non-Christian friends. That was pretty huge. So I went to Bible college, and long story short, while I was ticking away at Bible college, I got employed as youth pastor at Forest Lake Baptist Church. Always keen to sort of say, I want to be on about discipleship. That was kind of where my heart was geared towards. But growing in responsibility in the traditional church, planting an evening service congregation called Night Church, and then just really ticking away at running a service and making sure the announcements are good and people are plugged into the roster for cleaning and all the stuff that comes with planting a new congregation. I felt like I really had a deep desire for people to grow as disciples of Jesus, but for whatever reason, I didn't feel like I had kind of the right levers to pull, like I was driving a car, but the car had no way of steering it. And I knew I was in it. I knew I was working hard, but, kind of like there's no controls or something. So there's a growing restlessness of spirit, I guess, that was developing in me over a number of years, really wanting people to be like Jesus, not just in knowing what morally is right to do or knowing the gospel, but actually being like Jesus in doing what he did. You know, I felt like that was lacking not only in my own life, but probably in the lives of the disciples that I was making, who are probably more disciples of, apportioned disciples of Jesus, who are kind of excelling in their maybe information gathering and learning the gospel, but not excelling in actually being like him in their life. So I had a bunch of influences around that time through links with college and just reading books, people like Alan Hirsch and Michael Frost, throwing out these massive questions and probably articulating better what I was feeling than I could articulate. But at times I didn't know whether I was drinking poison or medicine with those guys. Like, are you destroying things here, or are you building something here? Like, you know, they were difficult initially to kind of like work out, and gradually realize that you don't need to swallow all of what they are throwing, but you can pray hard and lean on the Lord, and he'll help the thing stick he wants to stick. So I was able to do a sort of a college research project. I had my idea that I thought the evangelistic edge of sort of church ministry probably was not so much a service as a most effective evangelistic edge, the church service, but more like missional small things, small groups, missional communities, whatever you want to call them. And so I did a little bit of research by contacting a bunch of churches around Australia in different denominations that I knew were sort of trialing these missional small group kind of things, just to see what they were doing, whether it was working. And I was able to pick away the last sort of portion of a theological degree by doing some research in the area I was really passionate about. That was transformational, exposed me to lots of books and churches and key people, and that was really great. Then 3D learning community came up. I'd been exposed to 3DM through looking through the college, and then by being a youth pastor, I had Aaron Fozzard up here from QB Youth sort of say, hey, 3DM's looking to this emerging leaders thing. Have you heard of 3DM? Do you want in? I said, yes, I've heard of 3DM. I definitely want in. Please let me in on this ship. And so that was really great at first. And then in terms of some of the concepts that started to land, they were like a deconstruction kind of wave thing that went on in those first early learning community things, and that it was necessary but hard. I was starting to ask questions like, can we even form people from a distance? I was preaching hard. I was learning hard, spending time in sermons, really preaching for change, passionately, you know, playing with people to be obedient to the scriptures, and then just doing the same thing again the next week without any sort of link or follow up or anything about what's actually helping somebody change. So asking these big questions like, can you change somebody from a distance? Is proximity a factor that's needed? Regarding evangelism, we as a church were heavily promoting like just walk across the room, these sort of things that try to get people activated in their workplace, fruitfulness on the front line. But really I was asking myself the question back in my mind, is evangelism an individual thing, or is it a together thing? I couldn't, you know, it's just ticking away, and 3DM's giving language to some of this. But really, I think I was trying things out. The church was very gracious to me. I think behind closed doors, I had a really wise senior pastor that was letting me rage at him a little bit, going, where are all the Christians? Why aren't there baptisms? We're growing from transfer growth. What's going on? And he's just going, there. I'm hearing you, but we're not going to throw this baby out with the bathwater down the street. What are you going to try? What are you going to do? And I came with little ideas. A thing that I tried to deploy in our evening congregation called A3s. For those of you read Acts chapter 3, right at the birth of the church. And I said, hey, look, Peter and John are going somewhere together. Why don't we go to places together? So after Acts chapter 3, I said, hey, A3s, go and grab somebody who's a Christian and go somewhere. Go anywhere to do something, to reach somebody, to apply Jesus outside these walls. We had little nibbles of success there, like people going and meeting in the park with a mate, hanging out with mates from work in the park, a couple of Christians and a non-Christian. And so we had little glimpses of stuff, but they kind of got swallowed up by the big wheels of just needing to fill rosters and assemble a worship team and, you know, do all the things of church. So one of the biggest things that smacked me between the eyes with the 3DM learning community pretty early on was the information, imitation, innovation triangle, and coming to the realization that I wasn't living an imitatable life. And even if I was, no one would want to imitate me. I wasn't like Jesus. I was tired, I was burnt out, and I was frustrated. And that was huge because I was so desperate to make disciples of Jesus, but you know, in terms of the way that he did it, that imitation piece is huge for him. People genuinely followed him. They looked at his life, they could see him, they were close enough. No one could see my real life. I was like a blur in every space. And so that was pretty huge. Another thing was just in terms of the concept of family on mission, not so much biological family, although that was a huge part of it, just that for discipleship to actually spark and start in the Jesus kind of way, it needed to probably happen on the home front before it can happen anywhere else. So that was pretty huge. And then just the thought that teaching people to be like Jesus starts with somebody who's willing to be like Jesus. And I felt like, there was so much that got exposed in my efforts to live like Jesus or be like Jesus and make disciples were just really lacking in a lot of areas. And that was pretty huge. I guess the other sort of reflection on some of the 3DM learning community stuff for me was the fact that I was doing it without Hayley for the most part. I was flying down to Melbourne and being with the community of people and coming back all excited to kind of deploy some of this stuff, but realizing that, I'd been afforded something that Hayley wasn't afforded, and I'd been afforded 3 days worth of sitting there and grilling and being helped with questions and things. And I'd come back and, try to kind of articulate some of it. And again, it was sort of that trial and error, and felt like sort of pushing mud up a hill a little bit in my own attempts to kind of deploy stuff that wasn't normal at all in our context, but that really I wanted to sink. I don't know if you had any more to mention about that, but yeah, that thought of not being able to do it together was pretty huge. But we came back from, I came back from huddle, and in seeking to roll out something, there's that accountability piece that the next time you go back down to the 3DM learning community thing, someone's going to ask you, well, how are you going to plan this stuff? And it's like, go away, I don't know, I'm not doing it well yet. But that kind of thought, or that pressure of like, you made a commitment here under the conviction of God that you were going to do something, and what are you going to do, was really helpful for me. So what that encouraged me to do, I guess, is just to start somewhere and grab a couple of key leaders around the church and just start huddling them. If it starts with me in my home, and let's get some key leaders around in my home, and let's start exposing my kids and my family to some of these life shapes and concepts and seeking to be like Jesus. And so there's some really beautiful moments with the kids and our huddle, because Hayley's got a photo here.
Let's see if I can see it.
That's there are two little boys, and there's a whiteboard there, and you can't quite see what's on it, but there's an up and out triangle there. It's our
That's awesome.
year 1 and year 3 seeking to articulate the up in and out triangle to our huddle, to remind the huddle about the up in and out triangle. And that was one beautiful moment where we'd just been talking about the Kairos circle with our middle son Caleb, and he'd done something wrong and he was feeling super guilty, and he knew he disobeyed Jesus and he wanted to be like Jesus. And so he came up to me and Dad said, "Daddy, I think you need to Kairos me. Would you Kairos me, Daddy?" Around the Kairos circle.
This is when he was about 6.
Yeah. So, that's beautiful kind of little things. And to be honest, I wanted this stuff to stick. I was so desperate to be a disciple maker like Jesus was a disciple maker. But that ongoing kind of frustration of, gee, it's hard to get this stuff to stick when it's so abnormal. I don't want it to be abnormal forever. What can happen next? And that was kind of that space where we were in for a little while, just longing to take these little nibbles with family and little nibbles with a few leaders and that kind of stuff. So then I guess the next phase for us was really journeying and seeing our journey link up with the Forest Lake Baptist journey. The church that we're wonderfully blessed in that it's a very prayerful church, trying to listen to God and say, look, what's next for us, Lord? And they felt the Lord was steering them towards being, and these are 4 sort of key terms that have stuck with us for a while, and that's sending, planting, equipping, and multiplying church, which when, you hear it from a missional kind of church lens or perspective, you think, oh yeah, sending disciples out, planting, new missional communities, equipping people for works of service, and multiplying. They're all kind of these missional concepts, but all of those concepts have meaning both in the traditional church in ways that kind of satisfy their kind of things, as well as sort of in the missional sphere. And so quickly learned that what I was thinking by maybe equipping and multiplying might not have been what everyone was thinking by equipping and multiplying. However, it was a really good, a really good church to be in, to have that kind of heart. Yeah, at least like we want to exist for something beyond ourselves. Long story short, the church had been saving up money to plant one day as a result of sort of thinking that way. A neighbouring suburb to our suburb called Pollara was being rezoned, and we had the privilege of, I guess, 2 things merging, and that Hayley and I had a heart for maybe planting and shifting into a new phase of ministry that could let us explore more of these concepts in a deeper way. And the church was sort of saying, hey, there's an opportunity over here with the neighbouring suburb. And basically we put a proposal to the church, whether it was something that we could, use some of the church's sort of future fund monies to release some of my time to go and do this. And the Lord led the church to say yes to that one out of much prayer. Before we really got the go-ahead with that, Hayley and I had made a decision to kind of move house into the area we thought had the people that we were going to reach, and regardless of the way that it went with church, we sort of had a commitment to move in and among the people we felt like the Lord was calling us to. So that's I guess where things happened. The church made a 3-year commitment to sort of release 1 day a week here, 2 days a week the next year, and then 1 day a week the year after that. We're coming to the end of that sort of 3-year thing now, and sort of starting to ask the question about what's next, that kind of thing. But I think in terms of the way that we took steps once we had that, I guess, permission giving from the mother church to have a crack at something that I guess sniffed a bit more like a pilot than anything else. Started connecting with guys like Craig, Colin Studley from up here, who were connecting me with others who had tried to do, I guess, a church or a congregational plant that had missional communities as a key vehicle within it. Rather than seeking to plant a service, we really wanted to plant something that was going to help us up in and out well together. So we had a bunch of people that we spoke to from the mothership, and we sort of explained what we were looking to do and the way we were looking to live. We used the up in and out triangle really over and over again to just gather together and ask ourselves the question, well, if this is what Jesus is like and this is what he wants us to be like, what rhythms can we do together to help us live in the ways of Jesus? Funnily enough, a service initially didn't pop out as the first thing we should plant when we were asking that questions. And so Hayley's probably able to articulate a little bit about what we ended up coming up with as a community.
Yeah, so as part of like the up and the in element, which is like helping our relationship with God and encouraging each other in that. We've got our grow time where we get together on a fortnightly basis, where we read the word together and we encourage each other and pray for our community. So that looks like a meal together, and then the kids go and play and the adults have our hour together. And then we also do what we call DNA groups, which stands for Disciple, Nurture and Accountability. And that's sort of the gender specific 3 to 4 guys get together or girls get together, and we process Kairos together. So either looking at a situation from our week or something and say, like, what's God saying to us? What are we going to do about it? We open the word and say, what's God saying to us and what are we going to do about it? The guys have been a lot more regular at that than us girls. There's been sort of, they're really good getting up at 5 in the morning and meeting together before work, or Jeff's got 2, another one meets at the park after school drop off. Dad's doing it after school drop off, which I think is really awesome. But us girls, there's sort of been, I think, 2 hurdles for us. One of them has just been like toddlers and kids and nap time, and trying to meet together just for 1 hour becomes this 3-hour half day thing in the cycle of our days with drop-offs and pickups and toddlers and stuff. The other thing has actually been my struggle in myself, in that there are times when I've been really struggling with my ability to actually lead the group and have been a little less keen, I suppose, to drive and push myself through that. So that's been a real actual learning opportunity for me. And God's been bringing me on a journey, and I've been having to Kairos some of that, and what's he, where's he got me on this journey? So that's sort of what our ups and ins look like in a formal sense. And then our out rhythms, there's quite a few of those. We sort of looked at it like I was saying, in our church, we'd already been through that journey of the front line. And it's like, well, how do we really overlap our front lines? How do we do this out together? So the obvious one is our local school community. We've got all our kids in the local school. So it's around, like, very early on, we're like, right, when we're going to school drop off and pick up, we're actually going to be there. We're going to be intentional. We're going to meet people. We're not just going to drop and run. We're going to welcome people and try and actually build networks, have play dates. We started doing what we call open home Friday and fortnightly, which is where we just invite anyone back after school pickup in the afternoon at 2:30 on a Friday to come back and just hang out at our house. And that we have afternoon tea, and it just sort of, people just come, and it sort of ebbs and flows into this dinner that then could be, I think we've had up to about 40 people max. Sometimes it's only like the core of maybe 15 or so people. But it's just a time of welcoming anybody, connecting people and hanging out to them, getting to know people. And we had the opportunity to pray. The only thing we really do formally is grace before dinner. But, you know, when people have actually said, oh, you know, we've got this family situation going on, then we pray for them with dinner or that. So that's sort of, and then we do a lot of along the way stuff. So a bunch of us women, we all go to the same gym together. So we often go together. So we're doing that out and people recognise us. We invite people into that space, or the guys have their board game night where they get together each Saturday night and invite other people to join them in that. So that's sort of what our rhythms kind of look like. And yeah, so over the past couple of years, we've had about 5 more adults who have joined us in that regular rhythms. And then there's sort of a stack of other people who have joined us sort of more on the fringes, where they just become great friends, you know, and it's really awesome to be able to do that. And there are opportunities when we get to share Jesus with them, and they get to see how we're living for Jesus in that. So it's been really cool. And then, yeah, like Geoff said, services haven't been the focus or the driving sense, but we have really identified that it would be good to be able to join together in some sort of an informal service. So at the end of last year, we had a Christmas service in our home, which was really awesome. We had a combination of people from our plant team and just other people we'd connected with who invited along to that. And it was really informal, but everyone sort of...
You had families kind of sitting together at their own table doing crafts. It was like a sermonette for 3 minutes and then some craft related to that, and then a sermonette for 3 minutes and craft. And so try to keep all the families together and activated there in one space. So it wasn't, you know, 2 songs, announcements, a song, a sermon, and another song. It was something a little bit different than that.
So, and we were actually looking to do an Easter one, and then COVID happened. And so it's sort of reevaluating that, but yeah, and how that fits in, because we've had a number of families along the way who have then seen who we are and how we're living, and then they've gone, oh, I'd love to join church, and then they connect in with the service at Forest Lake Baptist. So there's sort of we've funneled some people into that traditional model of church, as well as into what we're doing. So it's been an interesting...
it's good, but it hurts my heart a little bit at the same time. Yeah. I think there's still a general expectation that when somebody wants to come and be religious with you, you know, just from an Aussie kind of typical sense, that they need to go to a service to be able to do that, not just sit at a park and have a coffee and a chat. So I think that there's a growing into how we manage that and work through that, I think, well. In terms of some key learnings along the way for us, a couple of reflections. I've got a question maybe that I'll float here, but I'll chuck them all in a chat in a group at the end. So consider them, you know, rhetorical questions at first, or just think these through at first, and then I'll chuck them in for some potential discussion or any other questions you have. So the first one is, the realities of establishing and attempting to live in missional community hasn't really been like the books. So, you know, trying to deploy missional community in our context has really been on that innovation kind of space. Yes, you know, Jeff Vanderstelt can have this one that looks like this in a video, and yes, Mike Breen can have one that's articulated like this in a book. The reality is the way that ours looks is different to all theirs, and it's probably different to all yours, because we're dealing with our pragmatic kind of issues of trying to live like Jesus in our context. And so our rhythms are probably a little bit different, you know, our huddles are a little bit different.
Well, Jesus is calling us to something different.
Yeah,
you know,
so. And I guess a key learning has been that that's okay. Initially, I was kind of wanting to report back the kind of figures of like, oh, we've got this many huddles and then multiplied out of this ways. And it just hasn't happened like that. I can remember one open home where in the same open home, a kid ripped the towel rack off the wall in our bathroom, and my son got the opportunity to share a gospel because one of his mates read a verse on a pillow, and I was praying for an opportunity to share with my mate, going, Lord, will you answer that prayer? So it's just different. Hey, another one, another key learning, I guess. Oh, a key question in that first is maybe you've got some reflections you could share on the way it might look a bit different for you. I think the more that some of those differences can be flushed out in a group like this, the more, I guess, satisfied selfishly I feel knowing that, hey, it happens to everybody a bit different than the books. But I think it's actually a helpful thing to have out there. Second thing is it's all just really slow. You know, I think when we were chatting with the church around planting a congregation and what that might look like and the rate at which growth might happen and the way that finances might look at the end of 3 years, it's just a bit different than what we, you know, thought it happened. And to be honest, when we think about the pace that Hayley and I learned at, and we think right back to student life and our journey through a traditional church and reading a book here and trying some A3s there and having people around the table here, we've grown slow. And so being able to afford others the capacity to grow slow around us, I think is really good and really helpful. There is a pace of which multiplication can happen in the future, but particularly when planting something new and small, it's been really slow, almost frustratingly slow. But the Lord keeps saying that is okay. It is okay. You nurture the ones that are in front of you, the ones that are willing to connect, your people of peace. They're your people. It's not the 20 people you don't have. It's the people that are in front of you now. So I guess a question for us all around that is, what are your expectations of those around you and the pace that they might grow? Are you affording them the same growth rate trajectory as the one that you've actually had? That's a question that I have in my own heart and that I need to keep coming back to. A third one is there's lots of ways that the traditional model of church can play a role in helping to establish missional communities of discipleship and mission. What I mean by that is I think it can be easy to think, well, my church either gets this or it doesn't get this. But the reality is that for Forest Lake Baptist and for us, we had a portion of the church that sniffed it and went, this actually smells really good. We just don't know what we're doing in that space. But we're actually willing to take a punt and invest resources and pilot something here that actually opened up huge doors for Hayley and I to really start to deploy some of this stuff. And we're super thankful for a traditional church really not going, no, that's not the way we do things, or yes, we're going to transform all of this in 3 weeks and we're all going to be doing missional communities and life groups. This is the middle ground that I think has been super fruitful for Hayley and I that we're really thankful for. So just some encouragement, if you're maybe in the traditional church, a question for you might be, is there any sort of small step you can take to encourage some of those people you know who are thinking some of this stuff, to enable them to do some sort of a pilot or to rally a few of them together to try something? I think that there's that capacity in the traditional church to link up with our model as well. So those are some questions that I can flick up in the chat now. If anyone's got any other questions, we've got a whole bunch more of that are kind of like questions we're thinking through now that we have no answers to, really, things that we're just thinking through. I can pop them up in the chat as well, but mainly the first three that I pop up there are the ones, I guess, that if you wanted to comment on, you could, or Craig, if you've got other questions. You can.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I think we're all very appreciative of your willingness to do so. So a little bit of a thank you to you guys from us all. Thank you. I was taking notes, even though we've known each other for, I don't know how long, the last 20 years, I don't know. But I've got questions that were just popping up for me as well. But I do have an opportunity to, sort of ask those along the way as we continue to do the coaching thing. But I'm sure others on the call will have their own questions as well. But as you say, these are three really good questions, around missional community.
Apologies on what I just posted in the chat. I was trying to enter to help format these questions and it just went block. Sorry. If you can decipher it, please do. If you can't.
They're in there. I see. Yep. No, they're in there. That's good. Examples that may have around missional community looking different to the books in your context. Yeah. I reckon that's a good starting point for us. Anyone want to jump in on that particular question as a platform? Anybody like to comment? It's interesting because I sort of mentioned at the very beginning too, like our stories are quite different. as we've shared over the times. Yeah, anybody like to comment?
Hi, it's Kylie here.
Kylie, good to see you.
I'm in Salamanca. Sorry, got my kids running around, so hopefully we won't get too interrupted. I can't see anyone else on the chat, but hi everyone. Yeah. Yeah. So just around that first question, I guess something that we've been learning. It's really great to hear a little bit of your story. I only got kind of snippets, so thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. We've been kind of doing missional community kind of type stuff for a while, and I guess the thing that we've found that's been good, that we've been really thankful for, is that we've got a really flexible team, and that we've kind of changed how we do things, you know, sometimes year by year, in fact often year by year, depending on the kind of demographics that we've got. And you know, we were spending heaps of times in kind of some of the social spaces in Hobart, in pubs and stuff for a while. And then we all had kids, and it was like, okay, it's not really, they got to the point of actually running around, and it's like, well, I can't really do that anymore. Okay, how are we going to do this differently? So we started spending more time in parks and in schools. And, you know, so I just, I really agree that kind of missional communities, and it's just going to look different depending on who you are and the demographic that you're kind of, that you have in your team. But I mean, I really love obviously the triangle, and being able to just know, like, kind of keep assessing how they're going based, and how the communities are going based on at least trying to keep those three things in focus. And we've got a unique challenge in that we've got a couple of one missional community that's kind of focused in a lower socioeconomic suburb, and one that's much more in a very mixed, very mixed street, I suppose, where we've got some super kind of wealthy people and also some kind of housing department people. And how mission and how our outlooks and the rhythms of our communities actually look very, very different. And we're learning you know, a lot of us, we're a bit more middle class, but we're really learning a lot about how the people in the lower socioeconomic suburb connect. You know, like they don't really seem to want to spend time in homes, like coming into your house and having dinners is just how we were kind of used to doing it. But it's not what was connecting with them. So, you know, we're reevaluating that again now, kind of that out, and how that might work better, whether or not it's going to be a bit more program based, so like doing a youth group or something like that. Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to encourage everyone that it's just a good thing to keep experimenting and reassessing kind of your field and the people around you and what they might connect with. So some comments. Anyway, thanks for that. That's great.
Yeah, I love that, Kylie. I think that the reminder of not just coming at the shape of community with a good idea, what you think might work, but rather evaluate how are the people you're seeking to reach, you feel called to, how are they living life, where are they, where do they gather, what are their rhythms, and then allowing that to inform your mission and how you engage. And that's one of the things that I picked up with Geoff and Hayley, you guys talking about the hope and home thing. You're going, people already connecting after school, let's just invite them back and then let it be what it will be. And I love that sort of attention around how people live and do life around you. And then that was the guiding principle for what you brought into being. So it sounds it's a similar sort of principle at work. How willing are we to really be incarnational in our connection with people and meet them where they're at in their world, instead of just coming with a great idea? That's Other reflections, other comments? That's great, Kylie. Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, thanks guys for your story and your honesty. It was good to hear that it's not all roses, which it isn't, as we know.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a few comments to make. Well, I come from nowadays I come from perhaps slightly different point from, I suspect, everybody on the screen in front of me. Maybe not, but in that our network is not connected with any standard church. It's an independent network. That's not to say I haven't done that. I've been parish church minister for too long prior to the last couple of years, and I started a network of missional communities at the last church I was at, but now I'm independent. So I think it's been reflected in the discussion what I've said before, and as Craig knows, I've coined a phrase for it that is messiology. That in our culture, or cultures plural actually, to be more accurate, we have to be messy, and I think what we've heard this afternoon is an indication of the messiness of things, that it's not like the book. Another way of putting that is it's messy, and we need to accept that and become messy thinkers. Not to mean we don't think strategically, but we need to allow messiness into what we do. So what we do, which we send a bunch of, usually only 2, 3, 4 of Christians into a public space and meet there every week regularly, at the same time, same place, seeing the same people. But we adapt what we do to what we find when we get there. We haven't got a plan, except the basic biblical plan to make disciples, but we don't have any cultural conditions. We will adapt what we do and how we do it to what's there, not have any sort of starting plan that we want to reach this group of, university students or pensioners or whatever. So, and I think what's been reflected also in our discussion is that, I can't remember, where is she? I can't even see her now. The lady from Together Church who's disappeared off the screen. I'm sorry, I don't know her name, but
yeah, Kylie.
Different socioeconomic groups have totally different way they need to be approached. So we definitely can't have a plan, and we need to adapt to what we find. What else did I? And the really slow thing, I think we've just got to accept that. I mean, we all love to see, all the whole town falling down saying, what must I do to be saved? But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. In my experience, it never has happened, or very rarely. So I think we need to not see that as a negative or a discouragement. It's just the reality. But being an old engineer and likes maths, the growth will be exponential. That means it'll be very slow, but we need to establish it and pray that God will grow. And the growth will, if you multiply, it's exponential. It's very slow at first. So I'd just say don't be discouraged by that. I think that's the reality we face. And we've all got to struggle with that, really. Anything else to say? I can't remember, but those were the main things. Yeah, the church member thing, whether church members will be involved, I think the DNA issue, which we've mentioned before, is so important. You don't want people in just because they're willing to be in. There need to be people with the right, passionate, 21st century missional DNA. It's best to have 2 people who are really got the right DNA than 200 who don't, because it will kill the whole thing. So, yes, thanks. That's all I've got to say. Be encouraged anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, I so appreciated hearing your story. Just, so much that I see. I'm like, oh no, that's going to happen to me. Okay, make different mistakes. So that was really, really helpful. My massive Kairos moment was when you were talking about the pace that your team get it. Oh, that was just something in the way that you guys talked about that I'm like, far out. And yeah, we've talked about DNA, but I think about my own journey of kind of discovering what I think it means to be a disciple maker. Like, man, that was like 6 years. And now we've got this team and I'm like, you guys should all get it within the first 2 weeks of meeting together. So that was a real heart needed to kind of realign there. So such great wisdom there. Really, really appreciate it. So thanks.
So good. Yeah, I love that, the authenticity factor, the fact that they're not doing this to create something out there but actually, you know, they've allowed this transformation to happen within their family, and that's needed, that's been necessary in order to then lead out the change in a community as it's forming. But doing it that way around, and then it's a slower approach, because we've got to get it, and then we realize we don't actually get it. We thought we got it, but we don't, and then it's like we have to get it again, and then you know, the ongoing sort of cycle and just formation around us and others is critical. But great reflections there, Bree, too. Yeah.
Yeah, Brea and I were talking a couple of days ago about actually the importance of making sure people's hearts are on board with disciple making, rather than a shape or a model or a way of doing church, but actually is your heart for seeing people come to Jesus. And I think you guys, in your story, you just shared that first, your personal transformation, and then how you then walked others through that. Oh, so good. Such great wisdom.
Yeah, and it's it's frustrating. Hey, like it's so good because Jesus has got a hold of you and he's like squeezing you into himself. It feels so right, but it also in just the world that we're in, where everything happens immediately, where there are the pressures of like systems and time and finance and everything like that. There's this pressure to change fast. You know, build the thing that you're building faster. But the acknowledgement, particularly, the penny drops every time I think about a really cool missional community idea for a growing suburb. Like we're in a place now where there's 2,000 new lots before the government at the moment, about to be zoned for land. And I'm thinking 2,000 more families growing into this area. We need another missional community for this and this and this. And like, hey, you know, at the core of every missional community is these disciples who've been transformed. That took you however long to get to the point you're at. You can't just plug somebody out of a traditional model of church that, you know, is a go-getter for something and just throw them in and think it's going to look right. So yeah, that whole like continual, but I've got a good idea, Lord. Can't be just yours. This is like yeah.
And it's hard too. And, you know, you mentioned this in terms of the practicalities of life as well in your context. You go, really, Lord? You want me to have non-Christian friends? You want me to go after non-transfer growth? How are we going to get viable as a church? You know, the last part of a person that gets converted, as we know, is their wallet or their purse. You know, so it's like, how is this going to be a real thing? What are you going to do with that, Lord? But that, and perhaps, you know, there's something in that around the role that traditional church plays, you know, around supporting these endeavors. But also there's that, you know, living with that tension, isn't there? The angst of going, oh, we've got one less day support this year. Oh, we've got another less day, you know, support this. How do we do it? You know, expectations that something will just happen viably, you know, within 3 years. Is that, what do you do with unrealistic expectations from traditional church around pioneering ministry? That's a challenge.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, I was well involved in the discussions in the early days of what we were starting. And so I have fingers at myself in terms of my own expectations of growth with that as well. I thought we'd be further along in number than we are, but perceive the kind of growth well enough to know what in the lives of us and those that are on the journey with us, and how valuable it will be for the future. It's just that there's not money terms attached to it for now. So I'm a viable thing, theologically, spiritually, disciple-y, that's not a word, but whatever. And then knowing it's not quite viable financially, going, well, what happens now, Lord? You called us to this. Yeah. So that's a real tension for us at the moment, at the end of this kind of 3 years of funds that have been committed from the church. We don't know what's going to happen next. I suspect I'm going to have to go bivocational to some degree to keep the time investment up with hope and work out what the Lord does with that.
Yeah.
On the issue of unexpected, what did you say? Unrealistic expectations. I run occasional seminars on what I do, and initially, the first couple, I used to get clergy coming along, and one of the things they'd always ask is how many disciples you've made in the last 6 months, sort of thing. You know, they're expecting rapid they didn't get it. That was their measure of whether we having lots of people immediately come to Christ, which we'd all love, but it's not real. So if people have an old church mindset, I think that's what you can expect, unfortunately. We shouldn't have unrealistic expectations, except we have a great God who can, if he chooses, to produce some of those things.
Yeah. No, it's good to be reminded that Jesus himself didn't really meet people's expectations in certain ways when it came to what he was up to, and just hearing your faithfulness again around processing what is God now saying to us, what do we now need to do about that ongoing reflection and action seems to be absolutely central to your life and formation, which is wonderful. Any other comments and around this, even this whole question of how you, what's the small step you can take to help people along the journey in being an effective disciple maker, not just a leader of a program or, group and so forth, but actually being an effective disciple maker and pursuing effective mission. Did anybody else relate to that sort of point of angst of going, oh, actually, I'm called to be a disciple maker, but I have no time in my life because I'm running this and that and another thing, and the time is being squeezed out of my life, to actually be effective in mission and disciple making. Any reflections that people have around that?
I've been with Alison in Hobart now for 6 years, but we've been doing this sort of ministry for 30 years. And I really appreciated the comment about, Martin saying that exponential starts really slowly. Because our lives, I'm full-time in the church, but I released from certain things so I can do this missional thing. Because that time is minimal, we focused on the things that we were doing anyway. So we walked the dogs, and we started walking regularly with a group of people and discipling them as we walked. And I was door knocking, which has always been a fruitful thing, but it was taking me forever just to get down one street. So I focused on the new houses that were coming in and taking a welcome pack and taking someone with me. So things that were a part of the regular church thing, I would seek to take someone with me to walk that journey together. So it's a life that's caught between the mainstream church and the emerging church, where I'm constantly seeking conversion of the people in the church, inviting them, people who show interest, to walk alongside and to be discipled in this process. But also in my normal walking of life, walking alongside the people who are around. So the idea of going out in public and meeting in public. Speaking of which, I'm not in public. I'm in hotel quarantine in the Ibis, overlooking. You might see down there. There's Salamanca Market. So
you can wave to Kylie.
Hi, Kylie. So that doing everyday things. So my life is squashed for time. What do I do every day? I shop, I walk, I have a dog. So we make the intentional, the things that we do daily, an intentional missional activity. And in that time that we spend alongside people, we find them being drawn into other things that we're doing. And so they come to Messy Church, and the people who come to Messy Church then engage with their life. And so I'm stretching the church people out this way, and I'm stretching the dog park people out this way, until someone mentions the idea of doing Christmas carols in the park, someone from the dog park group. And so I engaged the dog park people with the church people in a team together to set up carols, and they're saying, well, 2,000 people isn't enough. We need to have 3,000. And numbers isn't the thing, but the enthusiasm for engaging people and telling the story and making sure that the story is told. The people who insisted on me speaking at the carols were the dog park people, not the church people. So they want to hear the story and they want to engage with this thing that is other than their lives. And so they're not conforming to any patterns, and they're not making a cohesive church or a church plant or even a micro church, but rather there's discipleship things happening all over the place, and I'm just feeding each one. Martin mentioned feeding the roses. There's an old house 3 doors down from our church who were getting rid of roses, and he walked his dog and he was talking about it and saying, maybe your church was built the same time as my house, maybe we could pass some of the roses up. And so we've got 20 roses that we helped dig out, and there's nothing like being impaled on a rose and shedding blood together to really connect you. So that discipleship time really counts. It's the little things that we do intentionally that make the opportunity for discipleship.
That is absolute gold. That's just gold, John. Thank you so much for sharing that. Discipleship being a way of life, not just something that we do, but it's in the midst of the life, following the Spirit's lead, connecting with people, building authentic relationship, and doing it along the way, in the way that Jesus did it. I think that's a fantastic place to leave today's conversation at. Really, encouraging words, John. Thank you for that. And again, to Geoff and Hayley for sharing with us. So thank you, everyone, for being in on the call, and may you be blessed as you go about being a disciple maker and a local missionary in your streets and neighborhoods, wherever you are, according to the Lord's lead. So bless you heaps, everybody, and thanks again for joining in with us today.